Chapter 8 of A Woman and the War. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Woman and the War by Daisy Greville. Comrades, in times when national emotion is deeply stirred, it is possible for the close observer to get a glimpse of the main trend of thought. Just as a feather will show the direction of the wind, a word may show the direction of a man's mind. It is on this account that I was deeply moved and greatly stimulated of late by hearing that as the gallant Frenchmen attack the enemy, the rallying cry is "Camarades, camarades." This is one of the most beautiful words in any language. It is the one by which a nation may rise to the height of its greatest achievement, whether in clearing its beloved land of a hated enemy, or clearing its administration of the abuses from which no administration is free. One hardly dares to think of what the world might be like today if the war had not been needed to establish the wonderful unity the word bespeaks. There's not on all the earth a more democratic army than that of France, and today it is a perfect union, a veritable brotherhood. From the highest general to the humblest piou, there is but one aim, one ideal. Prince and peasant pursue it to the end. One and all know that if success is to be achieved against heavy odds, it is by the help of the real brotherhood, the feeling that the accidents of birth and fortune do not count any longer, that a man's a man for a that. Other countries have caught a glimpse of the truth, our own among the number, but it needed French clarity of vision to recognize the truth and crystallize it in a word. A simple word with a mystic number of letters, and so powerful that when it becomes the rallying cry in times of peace for all civilized nations, the evil under which men and women labor will be swept away like chaff before wind. For many years past I have been convinced that the enemies of mankind are not men. Ignorance, poverty, greed, vice, disease, these are the foes that prey upon all communities, and while those who foster them are of no brotherhood, those who would combat them need no more than brotherhood in order to overcome. War, in which a man makes the supreme surrender, in which he discounts the terror of death and makes purposes splendid by his devotion, reveals the truth even to those who have never thought before. Will brotherhood survive war, or does it need the exaltation born of the greatest of world tragedies to open a nation's eyes, and keep them open? The history of our civilization depends upon the answer to this question. Nothing less than brotherhood will enable the nation to face the widespread poverty that already exists, but will not be recognized until peace is restored. There will be very little money left in the countries of combatant nations, and there will be very many needs. The care of the wounded, the maimed, and the helpless, provision for the widows and the children of war will come first. Then there are the schools. Nothing is more vital to the future generation than education, and few great claims are more in danger of a grudging treatment. There are two ways of handling a nation's affairs. One is to make the rich richer at the expense of the poor. The other is to make the poor less poor at the expense of the rich. The peaceful solution of the whole problem is found in the battle call of our gallant allies. If we are camarades, bon camarades, we can endure our national privations and scarcely feel them, for we shall all be in the same boat, and it is not poverty that galls, but the contrast between poverty and wealth. Down to the time when war began, this contrast was ever present. It was becoming one of the great dangers of our time. It has not disappeared today. But it is far less noticeable, and as we continue to spend between 30 and 40 million pounds a week on war, the cases of contrast will tend to grow less and less. I look for the time when men and women will find it as distressing to flaunt riches as the poor find it to display the outward and indisputable signs of poverty. One does not envy, even now, the state of mind that enables a man to say that he is doing very well out of this war. Among comrades, such a thing would be impossible. The only excuse for making money out of national misfortune is to be found in its wise distribution to alleviate the suffering that war renders inevitable. to amass wealth from the country's needs, to spend it on purely personal ends, to allow an orgy more terrible than the Black Death to fill private coffers, this surely is the negation of brotherhood, and those who do it are the outcasts of civilization, even though they purchase palaces and peerages and every honor that unscrupulous governments vend in semi-privacy. How will the men who have thrown their lives into the scale tolerate the men who trafficked in the necessities of life, or the implements of death, and demand the high places as a reward for successful huckstering? They will not lightly reckon them in the ranks of the comrades. In a world founded on brotherhood, there will be no place for them. If there be a place in the near future, perhaps it will be the nearest lamp-post. Stranger things have happened. Sometimes I think we could afford to lose this war, or at least not to win it, if the Frenchman's battle call could become the rallying cry of all parties and all grades in this country. Much as I loathe war and all it stands for, I feel that an instant victory would have been very bad for us, while a success won by waiting must at least purge our national life of the grosser elements. The mingling of high and low, of rich and poor, the price of strife demanded of each and all, the community wrought by suffering and by heavy loss, all these things are salutary for a nation grown plethoric by prosperity. It will not greatly matter if we lose half the world and gain our own souls, for the simple reason that an England wide-eyed, clean-limbed, and efficient could yet achieve and retrieve, while an England besotted by sloth and bemused by riches can only endure until the advent of a stronger and more determined race. Whatever our destiny, whatever the future holds in store, we shall be happy indeed if we can face difficulties, dangers, privation, or supreme victory with the cry of comrades. When war came, this country was fast sinking towards civil strife, drifting for lack of the spirit of good fellowship. A few masters, innumerable men, industry organized into limited liability companies, that the human touch, the community between employer and employed, might cease, the wealth of the country divided on lines that gave 90% to a tenth of the population, and divided the remaining 1/10 of the wealth between 90% of the people who created it. These conditions were making for a social upheaval of bloodiest kind. Education starved, an infant mortality greater than the present waste of war, discontent, ill-feeling, class hatred, all these things were, all these things may be again, but not if the cry of comrades is taken up. Whether we win or lose, I see civil unrest inevitable, for this war has sounded the death knell of the old industrial, social, and political conditions. Nothing within the range of possibility can leave us just where we are, and worse than the struggle with an enemy is the struggle with a friend. Though I hold all war to be fratricidal, yet civil war must ever remain the worst form of it. As soon as the old problems force their way again to the fore, the danger of civil strife becomes imminent. And let us remember that the working classes that come back from war will have forgotten what fear means. It seems to me that salvation lies in the Frenchman's fighting cry, that in giving his brothers a lead, he has offered a lead to civilization. He has shown us how to make the inevitable changes peacefully. Idealism is out of fashion today because, let us not burke the truth, our idealists were deceived about Germany's intentions, and those in high places unconsciously misled the people. Yet let us cling to our ideals, for they may prove our best possession, and let us realize that the cry of comrades may, as years pass and the old bitterness dies away, extend across frontiers and bind in a common brotherhood the sons of the men who sought to destroy one another. Such is the potency of a word that revivifies life, laughs at wounds, and disarms death. It sums up the aspirations of the greatest reformers and social workers of old time, of the men from John Bull to William Morris who strove for England. Only the French people, with their innate sense of selection, could have picked upon a word that can sum up the best of the ideals of the human race. We are their debtors for it, and there is no nobler way of paying the debt than by developing the cry until it resounds from one end to the other of our empire. It will renew our youth. It will destroy many of the old evils that were even worse than war. It will realize the ambitions of men who lived and died for England. In times of peace, when there is no reward for social heroism other than the consciousness of a supreme effort made on behalf of people one may never see, people who will never understand. If the future of the world is with sane, wide-eyed democracies, if man is to be free to do the world's work and develop human destiny without turning aside at the bidding of kings and rulers, if humanity, with its common lot and destiny, is to develop the spirit of brotherhood that makes life beautiful, we could have no finer rallying cry than France has offered. I do not believe that the country capable of originating and responding to it can be beaten by sheer weight of numbers. I feel that it is one of the world's assets, and that somewhere in the background the great force we strive to comprehend, and comprehending to worship, will guard it against ultimate defeat. To doubt this were to believe that the race is to the swift and the battle to the strong, and that the man who can invent the most efficient machinery can dominate God's world. Such a belief is to me the most unpardonable form of atheism. This world was not made, was not populated, was not instructed, that soulless machinery might hold it in thrall at last. The French know this, hence the battle cry that thrills me as I write. End of Chapter 8, Comrades.